First let me say thank you for having me. I'm humbled to be in front of you, and I'm honored as well. Obviously, as my introduction was there, my name is Mark Villarreal, and I've been in leadership roles and managing individuals for over 35 years. Now, this presentation is about how to define the next line of leaders. And you can see I put on there, building a winning team of leaders. Now, sometimes this is more easily said than done. Companies struggle with this because sometimes they can go out and recruit leaders. Let me just go recruit successful leaders elsewhere, but then they struggle when they come into their organization. So what we talk about here will be the whole picture of how to not only build leaders, but how to build the process that you have the environment that the leaders succeed, and that you have the environment that the leaders continue to grow, and that you build the next leaders. In my current organization, I actually just hit my 20-year anniversary, February 4th, so I celebrated that. But over this time, in the 35 years, I've had tremendous success and a passion for leadership development. My success has been because I built solid teams with solid succession plans that build an environment and a culture that builds a pipeline of future leaders. I believe great leaders are coaches, and great leaders lead with a servant's heart. My LinkedIn page states a philosophy that I have and I believe in, which states, the more I focus on others' individual success, mine comes naturally. Think about that. If everything is structured correctly, my people's goals and objectives lead to mine. This means that by focusing on their development, and therefore them achieving their goals and objectives, then mine are achieved. More importantly, because I focused on their success, I have to develop others along the way that understands the same concept. This then becomes your pipeline to choose your next leaders. A true leader's greatest reward is witnessing their people's success. This presentation is about how to define the next line of leaders by utilizing this process. With that, you have to build a culture that allows you to attract, define when hiring, implement a continuous process, and then keep that cycle going. You will see near the conclusion even tools that I utilize in this process. As we get going on this presentation on the next slide, I just let everybody know that all my employees know, all people that I build know that I repeat myself constantly. I constantly share a vision. I constantly remind people of the foundations. And in fact, on my wall, there's a sign that says, until your people start mocking you, you haven't said your message enough. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. What is leadership? Well, one dictionary defines leadership as the ability to lead, which really does not tell us the actions of the leader or how they have that ability. Wikipedia defines leadership as the process by which a person influences others to accomplish an objective. Perhaps even that definition is a little vague, because we need to understand as business leaders, how do they influence others? How do we define those objectives? What makes someone follow a leader? What are the traits or the gifts of the best leaders we have seen or that we have even followed ourselves? Think about your current mentor or your current leader, and what are the traits that they have that make you want to follow them, that make you want to learn from them? These are all parts of the puzzle of leadership. But true leaders have an innate ability to get others to follow. The next definition: provide direction and lead others by sharing a vision and a common goal and objective. The important part of this definition is the second half: sharing a common goal and objective. This may sound like a standard practice, but it is commonly overlooked in strategic planning processes and therefore can cause confusion and frustration, and there's just the lack of people going in different directions. Everything has to be aligned. We will speak to this in the presentation, but sharing a common goal and objective is paramount and foundational. Akil Shahani describes leadership as the process of social influence in which one person can enlist the aid and support of others in the accomplishment of a common task. Now, you'll find that many things that I teach and I talk about are things that I found from others, because a true leader has a hunger to always learn, and other leaders out there have a hunger to pay it forward. So that's one of the traits there, and this is why I shared this from the Shahani group. I prefer to think of leaders as providing direction. That is, a dream of the ideal future or a vision, which may then be crystallized into a common goal and objectives, perhaps involving some of the followers in doing so. I believe natural leaders have the ability to have others follow because they believe in that vision and the objective that is defined. I believe that individuals' natural desire to be led. People want to be led. And the best leaders lead others not by consensus, but they define the direction and the goal and make that consensus by their leadership. Leaders who lead by consensus create a dangerous environment. Let me clarify. Leaders who lead by consensus slow up progress and many times make poor decisions, and most of the times decisions stop being made. Leaders need to lead, and by leading, once again, I state that they are to form the decision and make the consensus through the process of leading. So gaining others' perspective is important, but only to help define making the right decisions. So the more opinions, the more perspectives, you're gaining insight to make that smart decision. Why is it important that I asked to define what leadership is? It's important because we as an organization and businesses have to have this defined before we start building leaders, because we have to know what type of leaders we want to build. So we have to take a step back and say, what is leadership to us? What's going to take my organization forward? And what's going to build the culture that's going to maintain that and allow us to keep growing? Creating the company culture. Step one in the process of how to define and build your next line of leaders is to define your company and your organization's culture. If you're starting the company brand new, or taking over the company, or at times you just desire to change the company's culture, it's time to change this, you need to step this up and make it an imperative. Defining the company culture is a process that is inclusive of key current leaders and managers and staff. But this is where you gain others' insight, opinions, and feedback for the sake of making an informed decision, as I mentioned before, with all the knowledge that's available. The first determining factor is defining what are the foundational values of your organizations that you want to lead from. So this is where I talk about company values. Values are what everything else points back to and are built upon. Values are what you live by through your action and demonstrate through your beliefs. I believe the most important value that a leader can have is humility. And I teach that humility is a strength and not a weakness. When a leader has humility, they know and they hunger to always learn, but they build and trust through transparency. Other values can be ethics, trust, respect, passion, initiative, and many others that you can choose as a foundation. Remember, values are what you live by and you show by your actions. And I state values are what you live by. Principles are what become out of your values, and those should be automatic and what you stand on. We're going to talk about mission. So we define the values. So step two is defining your company's mission. A company mission is external facing to your customer. Mission is your purpose and what you are in business for. A company mission is something that can be believed by all, adopted by all, and gives every employee a purpose for coming to work. A company mission should be educated and ingrained in every employee to where they understand where they play a role, but more importantly, how it affects their customer. If your organization is in technology and your mission is to help each individual and company succeed through the latest technologies efficiently, then your employee should be able to explain that to their customer. It should roll off their tongue. Mr. Customer, our mission is to help each individual and company succeed through the latest technologies efficiently. Let me explain what that means to you. Your mission must have power. I once went to a meeting for a large company, international company, and I went with a newer representative. And the first thing that manager asked us was, what's your mission statement? Well, the first thing that told me was it told me a lot about that company, and they are very oriented in their culture. Well, the person I was with froze because, unfortunately, he didn't know it. But fortunately, I was there and spoke up and told him our mission statement, and I explained it to them. But I was able to take this one step further because I knew their mission statement, and I was able to repeat, here's how it works with your mission statement and how they benefit both parties. So your mission and your mission statement should have power and a meaning, not just words on paper. As you can see, many things I teach I've learned from experience. Vision. The third step to the foundation is defining or redefining your vision for the company. This is internal to your employees. Vision should challenge your organization to think big. Your vision should rally your organization around what is in it for them. Most vision or vision statements in an organization is a 5-year vision. It should be big and bold. Then once you adopt that vision, you must communicate it constantly. Vision is something that you talk about, but because it's a 5-year time frame, you have to break it down into milestones. So that allows you to point to successes that everyone can see you're making steps towards that 5-year vision. I repeat, your 5-year vision must be bold. You want to be bold. Many companies believe they've done this, but if these are just words on a pamphlet, or words on a wall, or just on a website, but not spoken by your employees, you have only words. I challenge you to rethink your mission, vision, and values. If this is established, then your organization has laid the foundation for building a great culture that then builds great leaders over and over again. Here is another story that I want to share with you, that I was asked to go to lunch with the CEO, and the CEO was just recently done strategic planning, so the person that asked me to go was the person who did the strategic planning with them 60 days prior, but that company was still struggling. And when I sat down with that person, I did some research before I went there. The first question I asked him was, how come your mission statement's not on your website? It's been 60 days since you created it. And his comment was, well, I want my managers to memorize it first. I want them to learn it first. And that was the problem, is that you have to make it immediate. You have to make it imperative. You have to push it down. And I can tell you that that CEO is no longer CEO of that organization because the culture never got turned around. So we're talking about a culture of leadership. So now you think about it, we've created and we're living our culture defined by our mission, vision, and values. Now we must define, communicate, and implement a culture of leadership. And what does that mean, a culture of leadership? Well, it means defining the environment and you communicate it. A culture of leadership is communicating what your desire is, and it demonstrates what you want to build within the leaders. You want to reward openly. Once you communicate that, you want to point to others that are doing it and reward them and let people see you're rewarding them, and create an environment where you invest in your people's success. You want to define the behaviors. And once again, I always talk about rewarding openly. You define and communicate what your desired behaviors, and you openly reward. Rewards can be as simple as recognizing the behavior and commenting on it, but rewards should grow with time. And where I'm talking about time is the time that you spend with that person. I spend my time where it makes a purpose. My energy is important to me. So those that are showing the right behaviors, I spend more time with. And I want others to see this. In fact, when someone asks me, hey, how come you're spending more time with him and not me? I think that's a great question, because it allows me then to say, Well, I've asked you these things, I've corrected you on these things, and you're still not showing the behaviors that I need. And so therefore, that reward that you're showing is time to help the others develop. And then define and execute career advancement. So here's where I talk about that a culture of leadership is creating within the environment a system that you will advance individuals' career if they demonstrate the correct behaviors. You want to make sure that they're living the mission, vision, and values, and you want to drive their success. So I always create a culture where I say, you give me 110%, and I'll do everything to advance your career within our organization or even outside our organization. Now, some people seem surprised when I say that because they say, well, why would you want to lose people? And my comment back is you will actually gain people. So we've had an organization to where we have entry-level people become managers for our corporation outside of our business. We've had other people say, you know, my ultimate goal is to own my own business. And I'm like, that's great. Just give me 110% here and I'll do everything to advance your career. And those people that have gone on to other things refer people back to you. But you've created a culture that is rewarding and that where people want to work. Furthermore, new people bring in innovation and new ideas, and it just becomes a great environment. So we're going to talk about a systematic process. The next step is to create or to define the process of evaluating current talent and improving that talent for your organization. So you think about it. We created the mission, vision, and values. We've wrote them out to our company. We communicated what we want to see, what we're going to reward. But now we got to evaluate all our current people. So this must be designed and followed and part of your organization's DNA. In addition, you must implement a process that measures the same traits and behaviors that you're looking for in your new employees. So we're going to talk about that. So we talked about evaluating the current staff, and now we're going to talk about evaluating all applicants. So then if you design and implement that you are hiring effectively, you are evaluating existing employees and built as a process where they develop and improve. Then you must be aware of how to top grade when needed, that your total staff is improving overall. So however you evaluate your current staff, you want to make sure that you're evaluating those applicants that you're hiring that meets those same traits. And over time, it actually works as a top grading process that you're always improving. In whether your employees are developing or the ones that you're hiring, you're always improving your staff. So that's where we talk about top grade continuously. This process must mirror each other and complement each other. This is where you need to take a moment and stop and look at your organization from a 20,000 foot level. So let's back up and see where we are and what it takes to put that in place. We define how to build and redefine a culture built on values, mission, vision, and we believe represent our organization, and they will also help build success as we set goals and objectives. We have communicated this out with a sense of urgency and with our support to show its importance, and because of what every current leader works to live and instill in every day. Now we've defined to make this a continuous part of the organization's DNA to where it happens daily, becomes automatic, and recycles over and over. So the first part is building a process that evaluates individuals on their success and their development, so what we built remains. You want to make sure that you're maintaining everything that you've worked on. This must be built to where it's designed to be factual, accurate, and with an emphasis of defining further development. So we're going to talk about the assessment process. The first part of the assessment process is to assess the current members of your staff based upon the type of assessment you have defined for your organization. So this is one that I currently use. For the entire organization, this can be broken down by job role and be based on the assessment may be different. So if you have different departments that have different roles or different functions, the assessments can be constructed for those roles. When every employee of your organization or team has taken the assessment, you then create a baseline graph of how your team accesses. So the green line here is the baseline of the organization that was assessed for this one. You can see that this assessment goes across 16 behavior traits or characteristics, from contextual thinking, sales skills, perspective on change, self-image, self-improvement, achieving goals, courage, integrity, judgment, intellectual stimulation, charisma, flexibility, individual consideration, respect for others, dependability, and communication skills. As stated, the assessment tool utilized in this slide measures 16 characteristics that is the organization believes one must possess in higher levels for their success. The green line takes every person who took the assessment within the department or the entire organization, and this is actually the average of all those assessments. And you think about, why is that important? It's important because we now know that our starting baseline with our current staff. In addition, it can highlight and make us aware of our staff's strengths and weaknesses, and perhaps gives us validation if we believe that we were kind of weak conceptual thinking. This helps validate that. We evaluate and review the staff results, may determine areas of needed development and plan accordingly, because the tool has many values. Now that we have baseline of who works for us, we can use this when looking for new employees. And this will now allow us to measure future applicants when you're looking to add new employees and staff. This tool has a baseline of categories. That categories range from do not interview to borderline for consideration to recommend interview category. So my team uses it to first eliminate those that we don't interview for this process. So it saves us energy. You can set your parameters on what you want to consider, and you're based on your current staff baseline. Therefore, always improving your team theoretically. The key to strengthening and improving the team is to measure who you hire and put a plan in place where you hire those that assess above the team average. So therefore, constantly improving each new hire. So this is part of the same assessment, and this is the color graph. You can see based on the graph that shows where they're stronger and where they're weaker. So you can see integrity, 95, dependability, 90, but intellectual stimulation, 55%, self-improvement, 65%. So it points out and highlights what could be, hey, that's great, or hey, that can be a concern. Over time and educational tool, you're able to determine how some of the key behaviors influence each other's and how they play out in action. And you can see by comparing the score of this person to the team's average that the person assessed below the team average, making them not a good candidate. So that's where I'm talking about the slide before. So they're assessing below the team average, and you want to hire people above the team average. So we'll go back to that slide there. Now here's an example where two categories influence others, and this plays out this way. First, I will give you an example that I actually personally encountered. I was looking for a general manager. I interviewed a gentleman before I actually assessed him. His resume, he had great experience. He seemed perfect for the job, and he was well-groomed and very professional. So I assessed the gentleman, and he didn't pass. But my boss had already interviewed him, the CEO of the organization, and he said, let's hire this guy. Well, soon this person wouldn't listen to my coaching and direction, but only implemented what he believed was right in his mind. And some of those things that he wouldn't implement were company-wide things. So although I worked to correct this behavior, it ended up that this person failed. He did not want to be held accountable. This person executed the behavior exactly as the assessment said he would. So no matter if he was well-groomed, no matter if he had the perfect resume, he still demonstrated the behaviors the assessment warned us about. His score on self-image was high, but the key is that his score on self-improvement was low. And what that usually tells us is this is someone that does not believe that they need to improve. And so therefore they don't take the coaching. So you want people that want to put effort into self-improvement and that they can describe ways on what they do for self-improvement. Now, the other part of this tool is that if you're assessing people before you interview them, and we do that now, we do that when they apply, that this is a snapshot of some of the questions that the tool gives you that you can, that based on their assessment, it brings it out. So you can see, how do you determine the key business challenges that you should help your prospects solve? So this is a sales assessment for a sales role. And it says, high-performance sales professionals immediately seek to identify their prospects' key business challenges. So it's telling you why you're asking that. Which areas of your professional life do you feel are vulnerable to obsolescence? So avoid hiring sales professionals who are unaware of potentially detrimental impact of change on their skill set. High-performance sales professionals work continuously to stay ahead of the learning curve. Please provide 2 examples demonstrating how executives benefit from your services. So excellent sales professionals are able to tailor their benefits to the appropriate level or title, and you're able to test for this. The questions allow you to ask for exact examples so that they should be able to say, here's what I did in my last job, I went in and here are the exact examples. And you should be able to tell and validate with this questioning. The other part of the tool then too, it also points out to you, we've seen the 2 different graphs, and this points out and lists their strengths and weaknesses. So you can see that the person's strengths, it talks about Mark's response reflects a capability to, so it's really spelling it out on what it means in action. So change course in order to improve effectiveness of solving his or her perspectives. So you can see the different strengths, but you can also see the weaknesses. Mark's response did not reflect an understanding of these key sales activities. And it says pursuing qualified prospects with the need to put the proposed solution in place. And this allows you, and I ask direct questions. So I can even say, I believe one of your weaknesses is, so tell me why it's not and give me an example of where you've overcome that. So it really helps you to define that in the hiring process. Here we talk about ongoing evaluation. So we got the mission, vision, values, we created the culture, we rolled it out, we rolled out a process of how we're going to bring on our new hires. What are we going to do to have ongoing evaluation? So we have a defined process to hire those we believe improve our team and exhibit the cultural behaviors. But with this, we're talking about performance evaluations here in the process. So my first point here is important because we do not tie our performance evaluations to a merit increase. Now, many companies do that, and if you do that, you can separate a different type of performance review that does that. But we do it because we want to take the emotion out of the performance review because no money's tied to it. So that's where I put performance review process not tied to income consideration. I like performance reviews not tied to any potential merit increase, either annually or biannually. I personally use biannually myself. I believe that performance review not tied to a merit increase, raise consideration can then be factual. In other words, I tell the people, our review is not based on merit increase, and I do this because it allows me to be candid with you. It allows me, because I owe that to you, to be candid, and we can talk about your strengths, we can talk about your weaknesses, and because if maybe a weakness you don't feel is a weakness, you're not going to lose income because of that. It allows me to put a good plan in place. So that's where I talk about performance review process is simple with a 3-score format. I've seen some with scores from 1 through 9, and it becomes very confusing. So I talk about number 1 means that you don't meet standards. Number 2 means that you've met standards. And number 3 is that you exceed standards. But here's the key point on here. I want every one of my staff to know that it's very hard to attain a number 3 score. And I very rarely give them out. And I explain it because I say number 2 is the high expectations that I had when I hired you. So I explained before the start of the evaluation process that you will be evaluated. The evaluation has no tie to any potential raise or bonus, so it allows us to be candid, and I owe this to you. and I have very high expectations, and that's why you're employed here in our organization. Because of those high expectations, it's very difficult to obtain a 3 in any category. To obtain a 3, you must have surprised me, or you have gone over and above expectations. So the quick example that I give is I once hired someone for grant writing, and the person was a genius in grant writing. So when it came to knowledge of his job role or knowledge of grants, he put that he exceeded it, and I put that he met it. And when we talked about it, I said, I wouldn't have hired you if you didn't have all this knowledge. But now that you want to be a 3, let me explain what it takes. Now, if you want to be a 3, I want you to find new money out there, new funding sources that bring me this. And then from there, through the evaluation, the end of the evaluation is how you set goals. And you set goals together. You may say, these are some goals I recommend, and what are some goals you recommend? But most importantly, and I think we've all heard this before, that they must be SMART goals, which means they're specific, measurable, achievable, results-focused, and time-bound. So they got to have those measures. So I already stated that part there. So now we're talking about, we did the evaluation process. It's ongoing. We're talking about the development plans. And it says one key in building the skill sets for your current leaders and pipeline of future leaders is to build development plans. I get the question sometimes, what is a development plan? And it's actually a good question. So development plans involve activities and training that continually prepares and improves the employee's skill set and knowledge to better their effect on their current role, as well as for preparing them for future work, responsibilities, and opportunities. It is both a short-term and a long-term focus. Keys to an effective development plan that you determine that the goals are for the person's role and what is their potential. This is where your visual perception of them living your culture, demonstrating your mission, vision, and values is supported by your candid yet challenging factual evaluation. These two items, tied with the understanding of their strengths and weaknesses through their assessment, gives you all aspects for being able to define the gaps between larger next roles for this person and their present skill set. This is where you now define their activities and training that builds the skill sets desired. And you look for skill sets defined as soft skills and tie back to what leaders must possess. This allows you to create an environment where all are given the opportunity to advance and grow. Growth and development must be visible by all in your company. They must see it as, wow, there's a company that I have great potential. Everything we do must tie back to a person's role, potential future role, our values, and that person's individual growth. A proper development plan holds that individual accountable. Once again, a development plan must have 3 things. It must be tangible and measurable, needs to build visual skill sets, and needs to tie back to the roles, values, and the individual growth of that person. So what do we do to define the next leaders? Constantly, you must look at who your next leaders are. When I say constantly, I recommend this is reviewed when the executive team meets, and we do ours once a quarter. Constantly, you must always consider what your succession plans are for you and your current leaders. What if a great opportunity came your way, or came the way of your other leaders? Who's next in line? What if your manager decides to take another opportunity, surprise us again? And this is why it's important that having a bench and a process of development is an asset. I've never seen an organization suffer because they have too many great leaders or too many potential great leaders. In fact, think about the competitiveness this drives when people want to achieve their goals and improve their skill set, and they know that there's a good bench of great leaders, and they're one of them. That's a great environment. In fact, when I do see an organization with all these elements in effect, I see a company that finds ways to grow. They become bolder and more innovative. Opportunities open up, and I see them buy other companies, expand their product offerings, and I just see great things happen to them. So every day in your every day and in your meetings with your leadership teams, you must discuss who are your next leaders. You must debate So let's look at the key factors. It's who lives and demonstrates your culture, who naturally leads with a passion, and who do others recognize and look to. And finally, who demonstrates realistic traits of a believer. So, what are the traits of leadership? This must be discussed when you're discussing with your leaders. And therefore, all your leadership team sees who the potential ones are, and therefore, everyone has that chance to grow. So, we're talking about maintaining a culture of leadership. So, everything that we've talked about when implemented and executed creates a culture with the ability to maintain culture of leadership. Here are 3 keys to maintaining a culture of leadership. 1, people want to be led. 2, leaders focus on other success. 3, leaders want accountability and take initiative. What ultimately develops is an environment of servant leadership. Even your regular staff members take on leadership behaviors. And this culture affects, and like I say, it infects everyone. I'm a firm believer that people want to be led. So look at those naturally leading already. Reward those leading that aren't in leadership roles. Why would you not want this behavior everywhere? Look for and demonstrate humility, and the more you focus on other success, yours will come naturally. Teach this and coach this of current leaders. Make this your expectations. True leaders take initiative and expect accountability. They don't shy away from it. Reward success openly and demonstrate and take personal accountability too. Lead by example. Remember, everything you say and do is an act of leadership. So we now focused on maintaining this culture, but we need to find ways to measure if we are maintaining and recognize it if we are not. We need ways to measure our leaders. So that's our next point here. This is what we call a Leadership 360. It's the same type of assessment tool, but it measures what we want to see in leaders. This assessment is the color graph part of that, and you can see that it has 20 categories. So it still has courage, integrity, but it always goes down to what a leader does. On the bottom it says encourage others, deliver solutions, improve daily, addresses issues one-on-one, reinforce transparency, act proactively, 1 to 10, 10 to 100, create milestones, and you can see the measurement. But this is the self-assessment, meaning when we do a Leadership 360, this is what the leader assesses of himself. So it's common that most of the time when we think of ourselves, we might score ourselves somewhat high. So that's part 1 of that self-assessment. Part 2 is the staff assess their leaders. So what we do is we have that leader staff members do the assessment. And before we roll it out, we let them know that this is confidential, and that leader who's they're assessing don't know who rated them at what. But we also get peers to rate them, and then we also get maybe one of their bosses or a couple of the superiors assess that person as well. But this allows us to see what's the difference and what others think about them. It also allows us to break down, does his staff see him differently than his peers? So this is the comparison gap on that. And so this is why that's important, because you can see that this leader assessed himself very high, but his staff and peers assessed them much lower in certain categories. So this is where, and this is the exact one that I'm aware of, where this leader was struggling because he saw himself differently, and his business or that he was responsible was suffering because his morale suffered. So through this Leadership 360, we were actually able to recognize it. We did a meeting with the team, and we had them come prepared with their stop, start, and continue, things they want us to stop doing, start doing, and continue doing. And many of their frustrations came out in that stop, start, and continue. With that, we took that, and then we met, and because of the comparison, we were able to then build a plan and find the types of training to improve in these categories. So you think about it, we have a leader that is in our team, but he's struggling. And because we want to maintain our culture, we either need to correct that leader and find ways to correct them, because we have time and money invested in them, or at some point we do have to realize that how much is this leader affecting or infecting our culture, and we have to balance that as well. So we want to put every bit of patience and investment in someone, but there, once again, you build a plan, it has SMART goals, and you see if this person's executing against that plan. So here's a different one where the team was pretty close in accessing their leader. So, and this is one that actually directly reports to me, so I know this one very well. And this is a good sign. But it also, it's like, okay, this leader sees himself still a little higher than his team does, but his team sees him pretty close to how he sees himself. But there are two things that you note here. It does bring out a couple categories. Intellectual stimulation, you can see there's a little gap, and lead by example, there's a little gap. So on this Leadership 360, it also talks about where they give examples of that. So you use that also within this plan, because even if your leader has a good score, you want to constantly improve, and here you identified at least 2 areas that you can work to improve them on. So at the end of this, of each of the Leadership 360, you get a score comparison. So this was the first leader that had that gap. So the scores show that. You're able to recognize that gap, and it shows it. You can see you got the bar graph, you have the different types of graphs, but then you have the flat score. So there's many different ways to see that. And from each one, you're able to build plans and recognize, but it helps you make decisions to keep your culture. The second score is where the team scored the leader pretty close, and 500 is a good score on here. So you can see on the first one, that leader scored himself as a 500, thinking, I'm very good, and his colleagues would say, I beg to differ. The second one, the leader said, I'm pretty good, and his colleagues say, he's pretty good. And that's important to see, because sometimes you have to address, you want to maintain that leadership, and you want to keep instilling that culture. So we're talking about continuing the cycle. There are 3 key elements that make an organization successful, and I call that people, strategy, and execution. In fact, we believe that this is so important, you can see that it's on our logo there on the slide. Because you think about it, first thing you must have is the right people. Second thing you must have is the right strategy. And the final thing you might have is the right execution. Any one of those can cause your failure. But with all 3 elements, the cycle will continue to repeat itself and even pick up speed. This is why on our logo we have it around a globe, because a globe cycles and it just picks up power and steam. The wrong culture can destroy an organization, but a properly executed culture builds a foundation of strength that drives success. Let's review what we've walked through on this webinar. We first talked about what leadership is and the traits of a good leader and the ones we desire. We then discussed defining what our mission, vision, and values are, and we implemented them throughout. We believe this is our foundation, and everything else is built upon them. We then communicated this with our desired culture, and we reward openly. We show we invest in others' development, and with time, and with teaching, and with coaching. We show there is career advancement and growth opportunities. We then define how to level set by evaluating our current staff, and so we know what our foundation is starting at. We then brought in and defined a hiring process that matches the same evaluation of assessment to ensure that we bring in the right candidates with the right characteristics, and we even hire better than the candidates, making sure that they assess above our current team. We defined a solid evaluation process for our employees and our leaders, and we teach the evaluation process what it's for, and that we can be candid and we owe it to our employees' development. We challenge within this evaluation process. We build development plans and SMART goals, and we start a process of always looking for our next leaders, and we build that pipeline. We build a process to maintain what we have built. We bring in the process of Leadership 360s for our leaders' development and for our ability to measure and to help build continual plans for growth and improvement. We have built discussion if needed and make difficult decisions. Our culture maintains that we have a pipeline of well-developed future leaders in a transparent environment, and this becomes a cycle of repeating itself. It becomes awesome. So with that, I'd like to say I thank you for your time, and I think it's time that if you have any questions, we can take questions.
Well, thank you very much. Folks, we are now open for the question and answers. If you have any questions, you could either put it in the question box or you could raise your hand. There's a hand icon available on the webinar console, so if you click on it, I can have an audio chat with the speaker as well. So let me go to the first question in the question box already posted by Brother Ahmed Al-Khairi. The question is, how do I teach my next line of leaders how to be passionate?
Well, I mean, there's two things. One, you look for, you have to assess whether they have that trait. So that's where I would take the assessment, and the traits that I would see there is courage, passion, etc. They're in the behavior trait. Now, you have to talk about the passion, but more importantly, you have to start hiring for the passion. So you got to assess, do your people currently have it, and can that be developed? And there's good things out there about how to be passionate and then how to show that to your people. When I was 23 years old, I read a book called The 1 Minute Manager that changed my life because I became the 1 minute manager after that. And that was a big part of my success. But it talks about how to catch people doing something right. And then when you're catching people doing something right, that passion grows. But you need to test that as well, because if you're giving them the tools that you're trying to drive that passion, if they're not catching on, then you need to coach to it. Hey, I'm concerned. We want to show passion in our job here, and we've done these projects to help you with your passion, but I'm not seeing that developed. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Ultimately, I would say it doesn't make someone a bad person if they're not right for the job, but sometimes those are some of the things that we have to determine.
Okay, thank you very much. There's another one, a supplementary one from Brother Al-Khairi. Is there any online system to help pre-evaluate person, especially for management position?
Yes, there is. In fact, if you look at my slide, you know, the ones that I utilize there, if you can send me an email to my email on the slide, and then I can refer a couple to you. So I have some organizations that I work with, and so depending, and you know, if you could answer what type of managers you're looking for, what type of organization, then we can make the best recommendations for you, because there's several different ones out there. What I showed you today was organizations that is a sales organization, and that we're looking for those categories.
Okay, we another one, a bit rather a longer one by Dana Rahber Daniels. The question is, you are presenting a model that is heavily dependent on a valid and reliable assessment system, but your example of an assessment standard is weak without any basis in the person's actual demonstrated behaviors in their work. In addition, example of a leader who failed in gaining from your development efforts, but why aren't you more critical about the deficiencies in the development in your development approach? That could be why the desired improvement was not accomplished.
Well, you know, I mean, you asked a good question. And first of all, any evaluation process or assessments aren't just assessments that here they are off the shelf. Any good assessment has to understand and come learn your company. And what are you looking for? And what are you trying to achieve? Because then they can be fine-tuned around that. And then it assesses when they're starting with you. Let's assess your top performers and what is about these top performers that you like. What is it that they're achieving? And then let's build the assessment around those. So therefore, you're building it around the model of success that within your own organization. I agree wholeheartedly that your development plan sometimes has to be reevaluated. But you know, I believe that the person being a part of that development plan has to own a piece of it, or a large part of it, because it's not, here's what I think is your development plan, but let's decide this together. Let's decide, are these the goals that we want to achieve? Are these the traits that we want to help you learn? And are these the best things that I could send you to, whether within our company or outside our company, that helps you develop in those things? So it's multi-purposed in that, but you say it's reliant upon assessment, and I'm saying never take that people element out of it. So any leader, any manager has to be very active daily, very active in coaching. The more that you're coaching, the more that you have live examples, the more that you can point to, and it takes all those aspects.
Thank you very much. We have another one from Paul Gracely. The question is, you have described a very active role of leaders to follow in developing and enhancing employee performance. What is the role of trust in implementing your system?
Well, I would say this. I mean, trust isn't blind. I can trust my daughter to clean her room, but just so there's two. I'll take that example. So when I teach my daughter, I want your room cleaned out. She can't go out on the weekend, but I have to first say, what is a clean room? Because her perception may be different than mine. So we have to take a step back and say, here's my definition of a clean room. And then therefore, then trust is like a bank. And so therefore, she makes deposits in that couple Fridays I'll check, hey, the room's clean, hey, the room's clean, hey, she's doing a good job. And that builds up that bank account to where trust builds. And then therefore, it becomes where you relax. So I communicate that, look, trust isn't blind, trust is verified. And but trust is built. And as you earn that trust and that, then you're given more power, more freedom, and more authority. I want the people that I can trust. One of the people, the owner